Hello and welcome. My name is John Gazvinian. This is Scholars to Storytellers, where we help academics, scholars just like you, navigate the world of trade publishing and get your work out, get your books out to a much more general audience than ever before. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that's in some ways very simple and basic, but I actually think is really, really important, which is quite simply what actually is a trade press. I'm sure you've heard this term thrown around quite a lot. Maybe you've thrown the phrase around quite a lot. You say, "Oh, I want to write a trade book." But I find that sometimes we don't always really know what we mean when we say trade publishing. Um, you want to write a trade book, but do we have a really clear understanding of what that definition actually is? So I want to talk a little bit today about what exactly we mean when we say trade publishing, where that term comes from, and most importantly, how it's different from everything you're used to, how it's different from everything that you've done up to this point in your academic career. I'm guessing that if you're listening to this video, you have many, many years of experience. You've perhaps published one, two, three, maybe five books with academic publishers, monographs, or perhaps meteor kind of academic books that have been published with presses ranging from Routledge to University of Minnesota Press to perhaps University of California Press or what have you. And you're used to a certain way of doing things, right? And you're probably at least somewhat aware that the way of doing things is a little bit different in the trade publishing world, but perhaps this world is still a little bit of a mystery to you. So I want to just really break down some of the basic concepts today of what exactly trade publishing is and how it's different from what you may have done, everything you may have done up to this point in your career. So let's just jump right in. And let's start with some simple definitions. The most important thing to kind of get across is that the lines are much blurrier than they used to be these days. In fact, a lot of my friends and colleagues who work for university presses, academic presses, don't like it when I use this term trade press. I say, "Oh, I like to help people get published, with trade presses, unlike your press," because they're very quick to say, "No, no, wait, we're a trade press too. We do a trade list or we do trade books." And that's true, particularly of some of the larger and more impressive academic publishers. I mean, you've all seen books published by University of Chicago Press, Harvard, Belknap, Princeton does some great ones. California, Oxford University Press, of course. And it's true that these are publishers that do what you could call trade books, books that kind of cross over a little bit more into the public realm. And at the same time, it's also true that a lot of what we think of as big trade presses are they have imprints or divisions or simply editors who like to publish books that you could describe, for lack of a better word, as being a little bit more highbrow, a little bit more aimed at kind of serious readers, the kind of serious nonfiction category that we sometimes talk about within the trade world. That's not just true of the really big publishers like HarperCollins and Simon and Schuster and Norton and Penguin Random House, but also there's a kind of long tail, right? If you want to think of it that way, of publishers that are definitely trade publishers based in New York, etc. But they do books that are less sensationalistic and less kind of mass market, but are a little bit more aimed at serious readers. For example, Basic Books, Nation Books, Farrar, Straus and Giroux, FSG. Some of these publishers you will have come across that are 100% trade, but they're a little bit different from HarperCollins, for example, right? And then there's everything in between. There are publishers that are somewhat independent, that kind of do things that are a little bit academic, a little bit tradey. Verso comes to mind, IB Tauris, some of the big UK publishers especially, that have US presences as well, North American presences as well. So the lines are blurry. It's not a black and white. It's not a simple binary thing. And I know that as academics, you love to hear that. Love to hear that things are not binary and not black and white. So it's important to bear that in mind when we say trade. But fundamentally, on a very, very simple level, the term trade press comes from the time when it described publishers who were publishing their books for the trade. And what that meant was the publishing trade, the book buying trade. the trade, the industry in which there were distribution networks with bookshops and libraries and so on and so forth, as opposed to publishers that were specialist or academic in some way or another. So that's just a very, very basic, kind of overview of definitions and terms, but that may not be that useful to you. Let's talk about what really distinguishes a trade press from an academic publisher of the type that you might be more used to. Fundamentally, the big difference, and I want you to internalize this with every fiber of your being, because this is so important. The biggest fundamental, simple difference between what we think of as kind of trade presses and academic presses is the reason for the publisher's existence. Why do they exist as a publisher? This is a crude oversimplification, and forgive me for that. But I do think sometimes crude oversimplifications can be useful in terms of helping us think about things. Fundamentally, why do academic publishers exist traditionally? They exist to support scholarship. They exist so that when people are going up for tenure or for review or for promotion, they have a book published that is a contribution to the field, right? Their main driving raison d'etre is not anything beyond that, at least traditionally and originally, right? The idea is that they exist so that there is an outlet, a publishable outlet for distributing books within your field, so that your colleagues at other universities and around the world can read your work in a way that is easily kind of purchased, right? This is, again, all way before the internet days, right? This is kind of why university presses were created. As you can imagine, that's not tremendously commercially viable, right? So this is why traditionally academic publishers will publish books for $150 and sell 300 copies to libraries, because it's hard to make that model add up. Paper costs a lot of money, printing costs a lot of money, editing costs a lot of money, a lot of overheads, et cetera, et cetera. On top of which, even at $100, they're still probably losing money, which is maybe really depressing for you to hear, but it's important to remember. So most of these academic publishers are actually loss-making, which means that they are fundamentally subsidized by their universities, which see them as a kind of brand extension of the university, right? So most major universities at one point or another in the 20th century established their own publishing houses. That is very different from the reason for existence of a big commercial or trade publisher. Trade publishers exist to make money. It's as simple as that. If they don't make money, they don't exist. No one's subsidizing the work that they're doing. They're not there to support scholarship. They're there to sell products, to sell books. Most of them these days, as you might know, are owned by larger corporations, which are owned by larger corporations, which are owned by even larger corporations, which are all ultimately owned probably by a company like Bertelsmann or Viacom or something like that, right? Big media companies, which means that they fundamentally exist to return profits to shareholders. Now, why am I banging on about this so much? Because you have to absorb that fundamental difference into your thinking if you are trying to publish for trade. That means you have to fundamentally think differently from the way you've always thought about publishing. So how does this manifest? This difference is visible and palpable at every stage of the process. So let me break it down for you like this. If you find an editor at Cornell University Press, for example, who is excited about your work, what do? They say, oh, well, send us the manuscript. I'd like to, or let me talk more to you about it. And they want to have this conversation that's very intellectual, that's maybe, a little bit about how to frame your ideas and how to create a narrative and, all that. But really, they want to understand your scholarship. They're thinking immediately about peer review and sending it out and all these things, and they want to see the whole monograph. When you get an editor at HarperCollins excited about your book, the very first thing they do is they walk down the hall to the marketing department and they say, can we sell this book? That's what I want you to really hear. That is what is so different about this process. If they can't sell the book, if they can't imagine someone walking into a bookshop, Barnes & Noble or whatever, and putting down $35 for your book, it's not going to get published. It's as simple as that. There's not going to be a conversation about how worthy or valuable it is to the field or or to the world or what have. Are people going to buy this or not? That's all we want to know. Because if they're not going to buy it, then we're going to lose money on that. And then we're going to be in trouble with the head honcho, who then has to explain to the other head honcho and then the one above that why it is that we're not returning profits to shareholders. It's not that crude. It's not like, and I really want to emphasize this. People who work in trade publishing are lovely, wonderful people who got into this line of work because they love books. And for the most part, they're not paid very well. So it's not like they're these evil drones working for Acme Book Publishing Corporation, as you might imagine. They love the work they do and they care about publishing good books, but they know that at the end of the day, the book's got to sell. And that is something that is of concern to university publisher press editors as well, but not to this with the same level of pressure. There, it's like, well, can this sell at like $120? Enough copies that we won't lose money hand over fist. That conversation comes into it. But more importantly for them, it's like, is this an important contribution to scholarship that we want to put our brand on? As University of Texas Press, for example, right? Very, very different way of thinking, which means your way of thinking has to be really different. This is visible and palpable at every stage of the process. In other words, what I'm building up to is that the book is a product, and you have to think of it as a product. And I know this is going to upset a lot of you. If you're a typical academic in the humanities and social sciences, this sentence that I just put up on the screen is anathema to you. But I'm sorry, you are entering a different kind of world if this is what you want to do. And that has a whole different set of rules and gatekeeping and so on. You've become very used to navigating the rules and the gatekeeping in academia and playing that game. You have to understand you're now walking to somebody else's world, the world of trade publishing, which is a very commercially driven world, which means that the books are fundamentally products that have to sit on shelves and sell. And by shelves, I mean including virtual shelves on Amazon and so on. Right? And that requires you to think of your book as a product. Now, what do I mean by that? Think about the way products are sold. Think about all those late night infomercials you've watched, right? This idea that, you consumer have a problem in your life or something that's missing in your life, something that's not quite the way you want it to be. And we have a solution to that, right? Books are a little bit different because, of course, they're kind of a leisure product. They're sort of a media product. They're sort of they're not, no one literally needs books to survive, right? In the same way that they might, need a particular item from the grocery store. But they're important to people. People care about. People who like to read books would say that reading books is a very important part of their lives. And they have millions and bajillions of books to choose from when they decide they're about to go on their beach holiday and they want to take a book with them, right? Why should they choose yours? That's where you have to think in terms of product marketing. And in other words, what is the gap that this book is going to fill in that person's life? What is it that it's going to tell them that they really feel like they want to know more about? You got to start thinking that way, which is a very different question from what you're used to, which is what is the intervention in my field, right? What intellectual gaps does this fill? No, that's very, very different with this kind of book. This is more like, what kind of gaps is this going to fill in our lives? And by our, I mean humanities and societies and people who are just, kind of smart and educated and like to learn about things, right? But who are not really deeply invested in the questions that shape your field, right? What are some other ways that this manifests this different? Well, these are some things that might surprise you and often surprise people who are new to the world of trade publishing, academics who are new to the world of trade publishing. First of all, there's no peer review. What? What do you mean? How do we know it's any good? Well, guess what? You're the expert. You've written a bunch of books. You've got friends and colleagues in your field that you can go to for peer review. If you're worried about the soundness of your scholarship, there are people you can talk to. You can do your own peer review. The publisher trusts that you are an expert. They trust that. When you come and you say, I'm a endowed chair professor at such and such university, who has written 6 books about, they're not going to worry that your next book is not going to somehow be intellectually sound or that it's going to be full of incorrect facts. What they do worry about is whether you can write and whether you have a great concept and a story to tell, right? So that's what's important to them. You don't need peer review for that. You don't need the whole manuscript. All you need is some sense of this person's idea and their ability to write. So the focus here is much more on the quality and accessibility of writing and the marketability of the concept and the author. Yeah, I know you don't like that, but again, you too are a kind of product, right? So how marketable are you? I know that seems very distasteful, but what I mean by that is, how do you present? Can you speak in sound bites? Can you do radio interviews? Can you get on TV for 3 minutes and succinctly tell us like what it is you're trying to say without saying, well, it's really complicated. First, you have to understand. That's what we're looking for, right? The marketability of the concept and the author. Right? Other ways that this manifests. The book is bought on proposal rather than on manuscript. And this often shocks people as well. So you don't need a whole manuscript to sell to trade. That's very different from a lot of what you might be used to. What you're probably used to is the idea that you go away and write an entire bloody manuscript. You spend 2 years on it, and then you start shopping it around to university presses. And then they send it out to peer review, or they have a conversation with you about it, and so on and so forth. It doesn't really work that way in trade at all. No one wants to see the whole book. All they want to see is a proposal and a writing sample. Why? Because again, it's not really the idea that's on sale. And I don't mean that. It's not like they don't care about good ideas. But what's really important is the concept and the author. That's what's on sale for these publishers. They want to know that you have an amazing concept and that you know how to talk about it and you know how to write about it in a really interesting way. Again, it's not that these publishers want to publish garbage or books that are unsound in a kind of scholarly way. Not at all. But again, they sort of assume that you're not going to do that. So that's what they're really looking for. So these are a few of the initial ways in which you will find that this process is very, very different. By the way, I want to just quickly, before I forget, say, if this content is interesting to you and useful to you, you should check us out on the internet, www.scholarstostorytellers.com. Click on the link in the description below. I hope it's in the description below. And check out the website. A couple of things I would strongly recommend: just get on our mailing list and get our newsletter. That way you can get more of these free videos and blog content and so on, and kind of join the conversation. Also, we're doing group coaching for a very, very low cost that you can join. Or if you're interested in the full coaching package, make an appointment with me. I'm happy to have a free consultation, and we can talk about ways that I and my team can help you get from the concept, the book idea that you have, to an agent-ready proposal in a short amount of time, to a proposal that was going to be eaten up, we hope, by agents and by publishers. We have a whole program, a coaching program that takes about 6 months that helps you put together a writing sample and a proposal with the help of an editor, a publicist, me, and a whole network of agents that I have as well. So the point is to get you quickly to where you want to be, which is writing a trade book. So if you're interested, please get in touch. I'm always happy to just have a conversation with you about your ideas. So what are some other ways that this fundamental difference actually manifests itself? Well, a little bit, it's close to what I was alluding to, right? Which is you absolutely must have an agent. Why? The days when you could kind of approach these big publishers without an agent ended many, many years ago, sometime in the 1980s. It is absolutely impossible, or very close to impossible, to go to HarperCollins, Norton, Simon & Schuster, Knopf, Penguin Random House, etc., and say, "Hey, I have this great book idea." They'll at best, I mean, you'll probably be ignored, but at best, if you're not ignored, they'll say, "This is a cool idea, but go and get an agent, and then we'll talk about it." Right? That is just how it works in this industry now. And that is very, very different from what you might be used to in academic publishing. You must have an agent. This is non-negotiable. There are a whole bunch of advantages to working with an agent, and it's not just about them selling your book, but that's a topic for a different video. That's a topic I'll do at some point. So then the obvious question becomes, well, how do you get an agent? This is one of those questions that I find really befuddles people. A lot of the times in academia, they're kind of lost and slightly intimidated by this. That's a much bigger topic for a longer video, and I will do a video on how to find an agent. But broadly speaking, this is something that we help you with at Scholars to Storytellers. This is why I created this in the first place a couple of years ago. I realized that there were a lot of academics who needed help with this part of the transition, right? They had a great concept. They thought it might be good for trade. They're not sure whether their writing is quite right for trade, their formulation, their conceptualization of the topic, the framing, etc. They were trying to find agents. I saw this again and again, people trying to find an agent and having a really hard time and being a bit kind of confused and intimidated by the process and kind of throwing up their hands and saying, you know what, never mind, I don't have time for this. It becomes a sort of back burner project, right? So I created Scholars to Storytellers a couple of years ago. It's been going really, really well. We've had dozens of clients. We do workshops all over the country. We do group coaching, etc. But fundamentally, what I say is that we get you from a concept to an agent-ready proposal in a short amount of time, and then we connect you to agents, right? So if you're interested in learning more about that, please do just get in touch with us. How do you get in touch? There are the details. That's my direct email. That's our website. Those are our social media. Please forgive me. Our social media is still a little bit embryonic, but we'd love to have you join us and help get a conversation going. So if this content has been useful, please do get in touch, and we'll see you very soon.